I was born to Lebanese Shia parents, and I was raised in a strict, tight-knit, conservative Shia community. High levels of adherence, high levels of conformity to the actual jurisprudence, and so the stuff that dictates what you wear and how you worship, and everything I did was supposed to be keeping the family's honor in mind and just the family image. So it meant that I was just very limited in terms of all the stuff that I could do. I basically went to school and came home. I had very few friends and they had to be approved by my family. Almost everything that we did as a family was gender segregated. Like if we ever went to the mosque, the genders were in different rooms. Even at like social events, there would be like a women's section and a men's section. Even if we had people over at our house, the women would sit on one side of the room, the men would sit on the other side of the room. So it was just that type of upbringing where almost everything was designed around maintaining sexual purity. And I was raised basically based on the idea that I was going to be, my father's daughter until I became my husband's wife. Every single moment felt like trauma. It felt like I was being watched and controlled and manipulated all the time, and I couldn't do it anymore. So one day I just kind of packed up some of my things and I left. And, as soon as my family realized I was gone, they alerted Hezbollah. Being Shia, being from Lebanon, it basically means that you are from the demographic that Hezbollah feels themselves to be authorities over, and that they're like the arbitrators of everything that goes on in there. By the time I left Lebanon, I was 23, which means I was getting to be an old maid, and I hadn't had any suitors yet. So I started talking about going to grad school in the States, and eventually they kind of were on board with the idea. And they placed so many conditions on it, and I just wanted to get to the point where I was on American soil, because then I could do whatever, and I didn't want them to suspect anything, so I just said yes to no matter how ridiculous their conditions were. And one of their conditions was my father would go with me to, set me up, get me into my apartment, set up my bank account, set up everything so that he has access to everything. And I said yes to that, and he came over with me to the States, and it was just by a day, it was just because he found out a couple of days after we got to the US. He got suspicious and he started looking through my computer. He installed this surveillance software that records your keystrokes, and but it was kind of too late because we were already in the US, and my father can't do the things here that he can do back home. So eventually he just kind of went back to Lebanon, and I did my own thing. I come from a community where hijab is mandatory, and it's a type of hijab that is not just, it's not reducible to a mode of clothing or wearing some cloth around your head. It's rooted in a modesty doctrine. It's rooted in a doctrine that privileges sexual purity almost over everything else. So for me, the hijab was, it was that I had to dress a certain way. I had to wear clothing that covered everything except for the hands and the face, and it was so strict that even if a bit of your wrist shows or this little underside of your chin shows, that would be considered haram. That's not proper hijab. There is so much focus and credence given to the voices of women who are frankly a very, very privileged minority to be able to voice their conviction and their affinity to the hijab. And that, I think that maybe makes people think that oh, we were wrong about this thing, and it's not an oppressive tool of the patriarchy, it's a thing that women actually like and want. The problem with that is anyone who has to wear hijab and doesn't like doing it, you're not going to be hearing from them. You're going to be hearing from the people who actually conform to their dominant cultural zeitgeist. You're going to be hearing from the women who are celebrated and uplifted when they speak about this because it's the way that their communities like and endorse the hijab spoken about. When I wore hijab and I didn't want to wear it, if someone had asked me if I liked hijab and if I thought it was wonderful, I would have said, oh yeah, go hijab, because I didn't have the choice. It's just this false dichotomy, the idea that, if you have if you only have one effective choice, and if you cleave to that choice, you walk around and you say, it's my free choice, I would have chosen that anyway, it still doesn't speak to what would happen if you would have chosen otherwise.